Welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 3. Today we're going to be looking at building strong teams. How do you build strong teams and how do you keep them really engaged with you? We're going to split this session up into building a rapport with your team, listening to staff, understanding individual motivations, and getting the best out of your team. And there may be some controversy, but there is going to be some really tough lessons for all of us to learn, and how really to get your team to be in the best shape that it can be. Okay. Once again, thank you for tuning in, and please, if you can, subscribe or follow the channel where we can get you this information as quickly as we can post it. We're trying to go once a week still. So to kick off, we're just going to look at a little bit about how do we build rapport with our staff. And what this means is, if you're a leader or you're trying to develop services or you're trying to develop your own team, you need to understand what makes your staff tick, what makes your staff group, what makes your leaders, how can you feed into their motivations? How can you kind of like get a sense of what they want, what their desires are? So that's why appraisals are really important. As managers, they might seem clunky and slow, and why are we doing this? What's the point of it? But really what you're trying to do as a leader is trying to get to the core motivations of why they come to work, what makes them not motivated to come to work, and how you can fix that as a service and as a kind of an organization. Similarly, you need to be able to show what I define as a fine line between professional support, but not a relationship that falls within family. Okay, so for me, it's important that we're like family is never a statement that I like or I allow in services that I work with. I will never openly say that in public, but I will always teach people to not use that term. In private, I'd say try not to use that term, because family is something which is very close knit, and you can't say no to them. You can't say yes to them without offense. And really what we're doing here is a professional service with professional boundaries. Okay, part of probity is to have professional boundaries. When you move into we're all one big family, it becomes very uncomfortable. If the service is not working properly, people find the criticism difficult to take. But if everyone's professional, and like I said, you build the rapport based on that, your service will succeed, and you will not fall into the trappings of these toxic family relationships that many services go into, especially if you're working with patients who are expressing certain toxicity. Sometimes that transfers into your staff and your values and your culture in your team. So some of the strategies I use to do this, I talked about one, about not to criticize in public and to sort of like criticize in private. So you praise in public and you criticize in private. You look for these motivations on this to create teams. So what are the motivators, what are the drivers that these staff want? So everyone at a different point in their life want different things. So you'll have certain people who may be needing to do courses or wanting to go out to celebrate on the weekends. They want to work weekends. There are other people who want school holidays off. They've got young children, they've got young families. There may be people who are going through the transition between being a person without children to someone with children, and then moving up through the next stages of life. You might have people that want to take longer holidays to visit people abroad, or they may want to, you've got to work out what they want personally. Then what you also need to do is try to find out what they think your service can do better. Create a list, speak to all of your staff, do it regularly. You know what's working, what's not working. You will end up with 5 or 10 things that are quick wins. And once you can activate those quick wins, action them, you start to get this kind of a virtuous cycle, like an avalanche kind of effect, and it starts to tumble. And then those difficult things, you start to make the connections, you join the dots. So if staff A has a grumble with this area, maybe staff B or staff C can help with that. And then you start to lean into your team to kind of get that support. Where you need to lean into your management and to your seniors, you do the same thing again. Hey boss, these issues are coming from my staff and I need some help with this. I might need some finance, or I might need an away day to organize all this out. And those kind of things you can do, and that's kind of like how you build a rapport. Once you get things like away days done with purpose, okay, it's about building relationships, about building communications. This is rapport stuff. Yeah, being easy, working out how people like to communicate. So this is sometimes the insanity of management is, some people like to be like one-to-one, in-person, in-room conversations. Other people like phone calls, chats, WhatsApp, or whatever chat system you've got. And other people just like emails. And you've got to have some kind of data system that you run for all your staff. And this person likes to receive information this way, and try to keep that going. It doesn't mean that you're not going to communicate with everybody in the same way, but some people will respond to the email. Other people won't. You send them a text message, they may respond, some won't. You speak on them on the phone, another group will, another group won't, and there's going to be told in a group, Some people like to be told individually. This is how you kind of start to build rapport with staff. It's very kind of, get in touch if you want us to go through, if you've got any kind of difficulties. We do some coaching where we can figure out ways for you to problem solve with in your service. But this is the way to build rapport. Once you build rapport, the rest will be easy. So you need to create. So moving on from that, it's moving into kind of like how we facilitate solutions or actions. How do you get things done? Okay, so listening to staff is really, really important. It talks about that, but you need to create like fertile soil environments where speaking out feels safe, and then you can truly listen. Okay, so in each survey, and again, this podcast is for wider, so culturally you've got to work out what's sensitive, how do people want to receive that information, but you've got to have safe environments, safe spaces. People talk about an open door office. Yes, so philosophically, when I look at that, your door is always open, but if it's always open, everyone can hear everything. Okay, so you need to have some kind of sense in that kind of, oh, my door is always open. Dangerous if that's an honest truth, because that means your door's always open, meaning everyone can hear everyone else's business. What you should be having is a place where staff can speak to each other. They can raise their concerns with you. These concerns, I've mentioned it on a previous podcast. If you don't raise the concerns with yourself and within your team, the symptoms of those concerns are going to be felt in your community, the people who use your services. And that's really, really where I find things to be a risk for me, you, and everyone else. So if you're running a service that I use, I really, really would prefer your team to have all of their issues sorted out within the teams. It's no wonder when the CQC come in and they find out stuff, they talk to staff at 3 levels. They talk at your micro level staff, patient facing staff, then they talk at your meso level staff, your operational staff, and they talk then to your strategic staff, your macro level staff. And if they're all singing different hymns or they're all saying different things, then they know that the organization is dysfunctional. And reason there hasn't been a real sincere effort to get people to have safe spaces where they can speak their mind, or make comments or do stuff, whether anonymously or otherwise. And that's really, really important. So again, coming back to the motivations of staff. So if people want to speak out, then you have also got to really look at the motivations. Okay, you've got to look at the motivations why people want to speak out. Some people might not like changes that you're bringing about. They might want to sabotage change. That's one big reality. And how do you manage that? Okay, they may resist change for the rest of their lives. Okay, if you continue to fight it, you're going to suppress them. 2 things can happen. Okay, you will find that person ends up leaving the organization, which could be seen as a bonus. It often is in highly pressured situations. But what that sends a message to other staff is, if I'm not going to get heard, and these could be your then healthy staff, see that happening, they may be initially thankful that toxic person has left, but similarly they may not like it because they realize that if they then have to speak out and can't, they too will have to leave. So it's really, really you have to be really, really careful with how you understand people's motivations. Other motivations, like I said earlier, you need to know where people are coming from. Working from home is the big new problem or new situation that we have to face, and we really got to use innovation and compassion to navigate that water. Science says that if for every 8 hours of work in the office, only 3 hours are productive. Not really many studies have been done on working from home, but I doubt it's going to be less than 3 hours of effective working from home. I'd probably be more than that. But nevertheless, team building and team spirit is very, very important. If your teams are across the world, then yeah, you'll understand how it's important, but you should set up kind of team meetings and get-togethers. You as a manager need to have a little window, either where you proactively call your staff every day, or you have the kind of open calendar situation, open office situation, where this calendar slot is open and people can book into it. Once it's booked, it says busy. It doesn't tell the external person what you're doing in that session, but it just tells them that you're busy and you're seeing somebody. That's how you understand individual motivations, and how you podcast on how do you get your best out of your team. I think, and again, you walk into a service, if it's a new service, you look around. If the service is well run and well managed, you just have to find your feet, slot in, get to know people, understand how people work, and understand what the goals are. If you're walking into a service or your service is currently toxic, then you need to do an appraisal, okay? And you need to know what's working and what isn't, who's working and who isn't, okay? And then you need to start to manage. You need to lead where you need to lead people, and you need to manage where you need to manage systems. Okay? Don't try to manage people, always try to manage the systems around the people, the care record system. And some staff are not so good at managing the care record system. Rather than speak to the staff who are very good at it and ask them if they can afford some time to support, this is leadership. then you're allowed to support the people who are not doing the care records properly. Secondly is that, okay, that may not work. There may be some frostiness towards that, people feeling threatened. But similarly, then you need to have a more robust standard operating procedure, if you like, or policy in place, or a step-by-step guide of how to do the care records, when to do them, how to do them, how brief they need to be. Sometimes you've seen care records that are super brief, and other times people will write paragraphs and pages which are unnecessary as well. They're supposed to be care progress notes. So that's really important that you understand that. The other side of it is to ensure that your team, in terms of getting the best out of them, is to ensure that they've got opportunities to learn. Professional growth and development. Don't think investing in development, learning, training is a waste of money. Never have that mindset. Two things happen when you invest in people's training and learning. Number one, they get better and stay, or number two, they get better and leave. If you don't invest, number one, your people stagnate, and number two, they're so poorly qualified they cannot move to other jobs. So you are stuck with them. The people who get better and leave, get promotions or move to other services, to pastures greener, they will always send a high appraisal of your service. So as they're leaving, you will have people coming through your door wanting to come and work for. You want to train people and go, and then what the legacy you leave behind with that is your team or your values or your culture then leaves with that person and goes to the other service, and then they hopefully can implement stuff that they've learned in your service. So that's how I would do it. So I talked a little bit earlier about appraisals, but feedback is important. Okay, feedback and appraisals is so important. Try to do the feedback or the 360 appraisal where you can for yourself as a leader. Get all your staff to fill it in, and anyone else, leaders and stuff like that. Designer, I'm happy to be contacted. We've got a few different 360 appraisal forms if you need that, but you need a 360 appraisal on yourself and all of your leadership team. Get that done, because once you understand your own personal weaknesses, and maybe where people cannot articulate it very well, they can do that in writing back to you anonymously, and that's where you will reach your full potential. You know your blind spots. So for example, once I did one and people said I'm not always absent, and it was not going to be possible for me to not be absent at certain points. So I just made sure that my diary was very open and very transparent, and where would I be, and the small little windows or pockets of windows where my phone I would be able to answer phone calls. So then that immediately responds to the feedback with a minimal impact to your working life. The final point is how you take all of this wonderful stuff you're doing with your team and make it meet the organizational goals. So this is one of the biggest things about your team. You need to sit them down wherever you are in any organization, and you will have your own organizational values stuck up on a wall somewhere, and you need to ask your team. This is a book recommendation, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I'll put a link in the bio of this video or this podcast, but that is really, really, really important. If you can understand what it means to set your own values, set your own, just one value, pick one value for your service and your team, then you'll see that your team will thrive in applying that rule, applying that law. Every time there's a debate or a discussion or a little bit of disagreement, you return back to your local value. You'll have your organizational values, but you return back to your local value. Once you have your local value, for sure, you as a manager then needs the artistry to weave it into the organizational goals and organizational values. Once you're able to do that, your team feels connected to you because you're listening to them and they co-produce the value, and then your organization is also listening to your team because your values here are embedded in the organizational values centrally, or however you want to discuss that. And that's really how you get the best out of your team. Okay, there are many other things we can talk about, but there might be more individual case studies, and if we get comments and stuff like that, we will discuss those in a more rounded or a more succinct way. Okay, so this is where I'm going to stop today. If you've got any questions and stuff like that, stick them in the comments. If you need our help, reach out. We offer this support to everybody that we can. Let me know, and we'll see you on the next one. This was episode 3. Thank you for sticking around, for leading the way with Cam Steps. Peace.